In this experience, I would find myself lingering in my in-between state, a position where my awareness is between the physical and the real side. Our creational simulation is based on whatever idea agreements we have decided upon that forms our consciousness. We place our awareness in that consciousness as though stepping into a computer game, and we experience however we have constructed the consciousness. We experience our decided simulation on the physical level through the senses that render the idea agreements into our creational reality. But we can also encase our awareness in our decided simulation, and even as we go to the real side of life, as we move our awareness from the personal self-consciousness, we can still be limited to our decided simulation. We always see as much as we decide, or that we take the risk to see. And if we are content with what we have, what we know, and our consciousness simulation of ideas, then this is all we will see on the real side, where we could have been open to seeing more, the other parts of the personal self and creation. The real guides and life can only show us more than we currently know, if we so decide and agree for this to be. Otherwise we enclose ourselves in our bubbles of self-conviction, and nothing else can feature or penetrate. Although, as we sit in the simulation of our consciousness, there will be much by way of agreements, the bulk of which we are unconscious of, that will allow all manner of situations, beings and individuals to feature in our real side experiences, as closed off to the real guides and real awareness it may be, and so even for the individual content with what they have decided and then take with them to the real side, it doesn't mean they are beyond being tormented, intimidated, and attacked by the ill-intended. The real awareness will be doing what it's doing, or rather just being, but until the personal awareness decides and makes the connection with it, can the process of becoming more aware of what we currently know and have up until that moment limited ourselves to begin. But anyway, on the physical, we are very much experiencing the consciousness and the simulation that effects from it, and on the real side we have unlimited experiential potential according to what we decide and risk to see. For as we sleep, we move beyond the consciousness, and if we have made the connection with the real awareness, then we are always given the opportunity to see more and become more aware as a consequence. This in-between state is rather a bridging of the two positions, the physical level consciousness simulation and the real side. And what happens then is I will retain the view of the physical level, but elements and features of the real side will bleed over and feature in my room. This is achieved by standing in the nowness of the real awareness, and at a point where transition onto the real side can be so, but rather than allow it, I rather prevent it from occurring, and am bridging then the two positions, not quite awake, but not quite asleep. Sometimes I will instinctively, or should I say, be real awareness motivated to do this, especially regarding real side attacks, that yes, we might well see these attacks on the real side, but not always will we remember on awaking. But this between state will have then that which is attacking us manifest on the physical level, assuming we retain this position between the physical and the real side, and don't react or activate the personal self thoughts or emotions, which has us then only able to view the consciousness physical level simulation, and although we are still being attacked, we can't perceive it. In the nowness of the is, time and sequence of events doesn't exist, as everything is in this isness. So were we attacked, say, 2 months ago, as things unfold through cause and effect time phases through the personal self-perception, in reality it's all happening now in the isness, and so regardless of when things took place in cause and effect simulation, we can adjust and deal with them in the nowness of our real awareness, and they can be resolved. But the personal self must decide and agree to the resolution of situations and the effects that stem from attacks on the real side. For as any attack is based on agreements that allowed the attack to be, so it would be a violation of free will for life and the guides and the real awareness to intercede with what was a personal self-decided free will decision to be attacked in fact. Generally, the personal self won't know the particulars of whatever agreement has allowed its attack, but over time, as we become more aware, the personal self appreciates how then attacks can infringe on what is a simulation of our design, and puts itself in an open agreement mode for the real awareness and the guides to be permitted to assist. For as we go through our process, as we face life, will be the confrontations and the attack opportunities, as we place attention with what we are facing. As we retain agreements through the personal self that we are unconscious of, that effect potential attacks, and as we agree with the ideas of others that we can engage with them on the simulated personal side, to extend them the opportunity of becoming more aware, the new you song and seek agreements for the galactic endeavours, etc. It's as though life, this all-awareness everything, can't act on behalf of the personal self unless the personal self agrees, and when we say act, it's rather that life, the guides, the real awareness, always does what makes sense with the awareness that it is. It deals with then all that doesn't make sense, the situations and distortions that then affect the awareness adversely. So often the personal self needs to be shown that which is attacking it, that it will agree to release whatever idea has caused the attack, and with the agreement released, so must that which effects from it be denied from our experience, and this would translate and express in whatever form it does, as us vanquishing the foe, or blasting it with magic, whatever method is employed. We are simply extracting an idea from our simulation, etching it from the script of our movie. And so, this is why I sometimes find myself in this between state I would suggest. The real awareness has facilitated it without personal self-decision for it to be, that the personal self can very clearly be shown the nature of its attacker as it bleeds over from the real side, and is very apparent on the physical, then must decide the release of the agreement that allowed the attack. In this case, in my between state, I had the real awareness impression of an approaching menace. Such impressions must be from the real awareness, as the personal self can only consider what it sees, what is currently in its experience, and not what is yet to come, unless the individual utilizes more the intuitive side, or can access the real side from the physical, as psychics and mediums can do. So a real awareness heads up, and then into my room would be a flood of darkness that was preceding an entity of a kind as was my further impression, and its ill-intended nature very tangible. Entities are beings that dwell in the lower astral, and as your positioning in life reflects your choices and decisions, and that the lower astral is the most forbidding hell-like area of creation, so this would indicate that those that dwell there have an equally as dark and ill-intended consciousness. I had a lot of encounters with entities for a period a few years or so back. This was based on effects catching up with me. As always, the causes we set in motion, although taking a cause and effect time to manifest on the physical, will show up eventually, and my astral projection practices, prior to finding the new presentation, had set causes in motion that would facilitate the encroaching of entities into my experience on the physical around the time I was on my process of awareness, a year or so into it, and singing the new you song. which in a way was well timed, for without the awareness I would glean, so would I perhaps be less capable of dealing with the entities through a real awareness that knows just what to do. Although the entities have featured less in my experiences recently, as with the cessation of astral projections, which cause holes in the aura that such beings can make use of, so has this particular brand of attack and disruption come to an end. But occasionally, as we go through creation and the personal self, as we get stuck in and face the whole of life, as we continue to unravel the karma, the idea taplines that bind us to creation take on effects, the karma, as we proceed with the process, and the experiences play out according to the ideas we have agreed to as we go about it, and the various beings, creatures, and individuals who can feature in our simulation accordingly. As this darkness engulfed my room, and the sense of malevolence very apparent, I would begin singing the new you song, which can dispel anything ill-intended from our midst, as it is the connection to the ears, and is then a part of this true light reality, and for the ill-intended it is a sound that is very abrasive. Like attracts like, and a reality that is very dark, or a consciousness very ill-intended, cannot be with the light sound of the pure, true reality, for indeed the two realities cannot coexist. Creation is aside from the real universes of the ears, but one can align the personal self more so with the attitudes of sincerity and gratitude with the ears, can get closer to its purity in a sense, than were one to stand in attitudes of ill intent, which would encase the individuals in bubbles of personal self-limiting ideas, removing them even more so from the ears that they actually are. So an ill-intended individual would certainly be repelled by the purity of the new you song. It would cause an agitation also for one who is content to want to reside with the personal self, but that is bothered by the connection to the real awareness and is that they actually are, a true reality they don't want to accept. However, it's always intent and decision that we are, and that is our experience, and if our personal intent, decisions or agreements we cling to are maintaining an attack of the presence of an ill-intended being in our simulation, then no amount of new you singing will repel anything. For again, it's as though life, the guides, the real awareness, the new you song, this overall real awareness reality can't act against the personal self and its free will decisions. And this was the case here. The entity continued to form in my room, despite the new you singing, and my impression was, of an agreement that existed that was maintaining its ability to feature in my experience. And so, recognizing this, I permitted the real awareness to resolve the situation, to identify and release the agreement of causality, and the entity would vanish, as the effects it could feature in were no longer available to it, as the agreement that incorporated the idea of the entity was no longer retained. What I have found with entities, if they attach to you, they tend to be invisible on the physical, although still there, but very apparent on the real side. They have a tendency to linger around the body vehicle, often just their heads leering over your shoulder, or sometimes you see their facial features mingling with your own. On the physical, less apparent, though some have the perceptual ability to see them, and an expression of entity attachment can be a distorting of the body vehicle physically. As an extreme example, along the lines of demonic possession, movie examples as The Exorcist, etc. In previous experiences, where I have had entity attachment and been on the real side, any individual I encountered there would be able to see them clinging to my body, or peering over my shoulder, etc. So what I would do here in this experience is that, as I retained my between state, after the entity was dispelled, I then moved my awareness, just as you can astral project from the between state, so you can remote view from it also, and I projected my awareness from my room into the bathroom, where I could scrutinize my face in the mirror and ensure that no entity was present. For although I haven't the ability to perceive from the physical anything of the real side, this was along similar lines of being in the between state, where you can see features and real side elements on the physical. And so, should there have been an entity attached, I would have seen it in the mirror, as I remote viewed in this manner, and although I knew the agreement had been severed, whatever it was that had allowed the entity attack, and so it could no longer feature in my simulated experience, I felt it prudent to be certain.
I just wanted to make a comment about what Kevin was talking about in the mirror. It's like on the real side, I see that also too. And I'm not sure if I remote view or just it's a view, but I sometimes I look in the mirror and it's like I check on myself. Like I look at myself to make sure that I don't get funny and whatever, all these things. And so it's to a benefit to do that occasionally.
Yeah, what I was going to say in addition to that experience was what I discussed briefly with Jeremy as well, that sometimes when I do check in the mirror on the occasions of an entity infringement on my experience, I will check for signs of excessive hair, because just as he was explaining, when he had hair inside his mouth, I've experienced that also, where I'll have hair inside my mouth or excessive hair on my face or and the rest and such, and that to me is again an indication of entity attachment. So, but that may not represent that for everybody, could it? Because it could be well representing or demonstrating something else according to the individual. But for me, that is an indication of that as well. So that's why I said to Jeremy that might well be what that might be. So just based on my own experiences of entities and their activities.